So this is a 2009 Audi Q5, and the report is that there's a sizzling noise when the engine shut off. So I took a look at this and found that the top of the coolant reservoir was wet, and determined that the coolant overflow line was the cause. So I actually pushed this back on, and I thought I heard it click, and I topped off the fluid, which was at minimum. I topped that off, and 3 days later I got a second report of this. So taking a closer look very carefully, and I can see that there's some wetness inside one of the bolts to hold that to the frame, and you can see residue on top of this. So when I first went after this, I cleaned everything to make sure I could determine a leak in the future if it did happen. And that's pretty important, because if you're not really clean when you work on things, you may not see the issue the same way the next time. So if you keep everything nice and clean, you can see this, and I'm positive that I cleaned this better than that. So I think my issue is going to be in here. This is a clip that pops off. This hose pulls out, and there's an O-ring inside. I had to remove all of this to do an oxygen sensor replacement. So my bet is that by removing this and just putting it back on without changing that O-ring or cleaning the area, maybe I have a small leak. So whenever you work on a cooling system, make sure the engine is cool enough, because if you go to release that cap on any car, and if it's hot, when you pop that off, you're gonna get vapors out, and really good chance you'll get burned. So I checked that first. I was really careful, because the engine still is warm, but it's not hot enough to generate any kind of vapors or something. So if you look here, that right there is the O-ring. You can see that moving, and we're going to just pull that out of there. We're going to change that. I'm going to try to see if I can size one up. All it takes is a small nick in these under pressure, and they can develop a leak. So as a precaution, I'm just going to change that. So I'm going to use a little O-ring pick, and we're just going to pull this guy out of there. There's our O-ring. Take a look at this. Some of the nicks on there from me taking it out. So I'm going to size up a new O-ring for this, and then I'm going to clean everything up, and we're going to change it. So I have an assortment of metric O-rings, because I know this is going to be metric. So this is the original one. This is the one we're going to put that one in. So that looks pretty clean. I didn't do anything, but don't stop there. We're going to clean this up the best we can, since everything's exposed. Make sure we inspect inside that groove, inside here, and make sure there's no nicks in that, because if the plastic has a nick in it or the O-ring has a nick in it, you're gonna get a leak. This plugs in right into that fitting, and that O-ring seals on the ID of the tubing, of the piping here. Clean it inside of here too. Make sure that guy has a good chance of sealing. Now before I put any O-ring on, I use Moly Coat. It's an O-ring grease, the tube. It's a little paste. See that? Just put a little bit around the O-ring itself. You can kind of work it in there. It's important to have this lubricated. I'm gonna push this over top. So we're just gonna push this lightly until it goes back into the groove. You can hear it snap. The new O-ring is installed. We should be able to push this back in. Let's see how that goes. Try to do this slowly. Fill it in. O-ring's insecure. Once that's tight, push this tab back down. And check, it can't come off. I'm going to clean all this off so that I know if there's another problem, I know if it's coming from here or somewhere else. All right, so we're cleaned up. Another thing I note is where is the coolant level? Because if I have another repeat problem, I'm gonna wanna know where I am so that if the level drops, I can detect a change. So that's it, and hoping for the best.